we are Team TODO with the Behaviorix video processing server. We're going to be presenting today a lot of what our work was refactoring code. Lieutenant, can you start off with the code coverage?
So a little bit about the summary of the project again, as we always do. Basically, we're the back end of this whole system that STD presented earlier, and we're just expecting videos to come to a database. We have an API that integrates with this database and a process manager which schedules specific videos to be processed by specific video algorithms and send the results back. So we can start off with our code coverage. So currently we're at 100% code coverage for everything. Previously, a lot of our internal code and the logic it was written using dependency inversion. So we were testing it using parameter injection. And then we had these main files, which would have very specific implementations. It would be like the mains. But using dependency injection, we were also able to test all those. So we have all the files being tested currently. We ran into some issues with the catch deletion method that Venkat presented to us. I think it's because Jest has a different required catch for every test or something along those lines, but we ended up fixing that. So for this iteration, a few things that we decided to, or we implemented, is the most important thing is we rehauled our entire error system or exception handling system. And I believe previously we talked about how to handle requests which would error out and not be processed. And we were thinking originally of putting them back into the requests array after some point in the database. So when, well, everything's empty right now, but when the results would be pending, and if they would not be handled, they'd be pending forever. We were thinking after some amount of time we'd move them back into the requests array. But after speaking with the sponsor, we decided it might be better to implement a failed section where we would return every video or every algorithm which fails. We would have some form of return for it, and so they would be filled into this failed object instead of being put back into request or something along those lines. So whenever a result is returned, it returns all the algorithms it processed, all the results, and all the failed algorithms and or videos. And so we'll present that in a second, or actually we'll present it right now. So let me go back and we'll do two different types of tests. We'll do a test that is algorithm specific, and then we'll do a test that is video specific. And so this should work for all different types of errors, but there's only two we're able to simulate at this time. The first type of error that we're able to simulate is if an algorithm does not exist. So I'm going to put test_algo, which is a correct test, and then test_algo2 is also correct, but I'm going to put here bad algo. And so bad algo doesn't exist, and so we should get an error for that. Oh wait, that's not good. Yeah, so test algo2, and bad algo. So we should see two results and one failure. As for this video right here, I have misspelled Miami, so this video should not be found, and no matter what request I put in here, test algo or test algo 2 or even bad algo, these should all fail because the video was unable to be downloaded. We'll go ahead and show that off in a second. All right. So we will. Okay, we start the API, and then now we start the manager. And so right now we removed all of the console.logs from within our code, which is in Subversion right now. But in my code specifically, I put in some console.logs just so we see what's happening for this presentation. And so if you look right here, I'm going to stop that now. what we can see is it outputted some failed algorithms. I believe it was actually sending some results still, and I exited it. But we can go ahead and see what changes took place in here. So first, this is the Miami, which is the, oh, okay. One thing I forgot to do is, because this video is misspelled, our algorithm checks if it was pre-downloaded and doesn't download it again if it was already downloaded. So I did not remember to delete the videos from temp, which is why it gave results, because the video was already present in memory with that name. So it didn't actually try and go fetch that. But we can go ahead and remove these and try them again. But if you will, for this algorithm, it did go ahead and do it correctly. So test algo and test algo 2 provided results, and then that algorithm, it came into the failed object with the name of the algorithm and then the error, which in this case says failed to execute algo bad algorithm on video, and then the video ID. Then the reason was bad algo was not found in the algorithm collection. So that is the reason why that failed. And so we can go ahead and run these tests again. Okay. Oh wait, this right here. And just to make sure that we don't have any videos in temp, go ahead and run this again. Okay, so I'll wait for it to, all right. And this time it output the correct error. Yeah, okay. So for both algorithms, it is giving the error that failed to download video, video ID to path temp, and the reason is download error, video was not found. And this happened for both algorithms, despite the algorithms being correct algorithms. And so this shows that it wasn't able to download the video, so it gave this error. And so in this way, when errors happen, we're not putting them back into the requests array, in which case that they can propagate over and over and over again. This same error system is also used within the process manager to perform logging. And so at this point, a log function can be passed in, and this same logging system will be used to fill the logging file or any other logging mechanism which is used. In my specific code, we're using console.log just so you can see the output of the error messages. And so that is what you were seeing right here. Yes, and so if I go back to, besides that, we also did a lot of refactoring with our code and tests. So we were trying to reduce a lot of our test sizes, especially the ones that were bigger. We removed all for loops from all our test cases, and we moved all constant variables to the top of our tests, and are working on potentially removing some expect statements that are unnecessary and moving to a more data-driven testing, as we find that a lot of our test cases are using different cases but have the same structure. So we're able to build fewer tests and pass in test cases instead. And this will help with keeping things dry as well, because we've noticed whenever we make a change in the code, we're going to have to go back and change all of these test cases. And so that is error prone. So for this iteration, as I mentioned, we added a delete object, or not delete object, a failed object We improved logging, we overhauled exception error handling, implemented dependency injection testing to test our main files, refactored tests, refactored code. And so in regards to our what is left to be done in our project backlog, we were thinking about adding time stamping to our logging system. So we have to make a logging file, and potentially whenever it gets an error, we'd also add a timestamp to it before logging it out. And this would be specific to the process manager, not necessarily to the database. So this is local logging we're speaking about. We made Docker images in the last iteration, and so we were going to set up communications between the Docker images, and then provide the sponsor access to our code. One uncertainty, we have to talk to the sponsor about all these, but also another uncertainty is whether or not we want to make the reading of the algorithms asynchronous. So right now what happens is when the process manager is executed, it goes into a specified directory and looks at all the config files to be able to know which algorithms are present and how to run them. This is done when the process managers run, but it's not done anywhere in the middle of that. So when new algorithms are added, the process would need to be restarted. As far as we talked to the sponsor, this is the implementation that was okay, but we'll go back and see if anything needs to be added. One thing that Venkat mentioned last iteration was how we were integrating this API, or potentially if we had any paths which were hard-coded into the code. And one thing we forgot to mention was the fact that we have set up, last iteration we set up multiple config files within the root directory, which are able to pass in different parameters for different things to make the execution less specific. I'll give you an example. So if I pull up the config file for the manager, it's going to give you everything from the path to the Docker configs, which I spoke about right now, the algorithm configurations, the path to store the videos in, the path to store the results in. In this case, we're just using temp. The path to the AWS config file, which is also a config file in and of itself, which has a lot of different things that we didn't want to hard code. The path to getting information from the API, sending information to the API, specific password font authentication, and then the ping rate. How many times, in how many intervals it should ping the API. The API has a similar config file, has the URL or path to the database, the port which the API should be run on, and the hash of the password. I don't really need to show off the AWS config, but it's similar. It just has AWS information for our S3 server. And so that is how there's no paths or specific implementations which are in the code themselves. Everything can be configured through these config files. And I believe that's all for this iteration.